So, I want you to think about the last time you sat down to play a game.
Yeah, could be anything really.
Right, like maybe you were dealing out Monopoly money with your family, or you locked yourself in one of those elaborate escape rooms with your friends.
Or even just grinding a late night competitive esport.
Exactly. We culturally treat all of this as just a break from reality, like this modern explosion of just having
A
fun.
luxury of the modern age,
Yeah.
right? Because we have all this free time to invent ways to blow off steam.
Yeah, but what if we're actually participating in something way deeper? Because today's deep dive into the research suggests that games aren't an escape from reality at all. They are like the very blueprint of it.
It's totally a massive paradigm shift. When you actually look at the archaeological record, you realize we're dealing with the foundational architecture of human society.
Just cleverly disguised as a toy.
Exactly.
And uncovering that architecture is our mission today. We are pulling from this really fascinating article from Ludoscience.
Right, written by researchers Clement Alvarez and Baptiste Coué.
Yeah, and they are taking direct aim at the official establishment here. They're specifically challenging the Larousse dictionary definition of the word game.
Which is huge because dictionaries are essentially the rule books for how we perceive the world. I mean, if the definition is wrong, our whole understanding of the concept is just skewed.
So let's look at the rule book. The Larousse dictionary basically defines a game as an activity with no utilitarian purpose,
Right.
just something done purely for entertainment and pleasure.
And see, this raises an important question. If games truly lack any utility, like if they are just frivolous ways to pass the time, why are they a pillar of modern society?
Right. Why are they everywhere?
Exactly. Why would humans, who are historically constantly battling for survival, dedicate so much energy to something totally useless?
It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And the Ludoscience article hypothesizes the exact opposite of the dictionary. They argue that games are inherently utilitarian.
So, to prove it, we're going to travel back through time to 5 ancient civilizations. We're going to look under the hood of these games to see what they were actually designed to do.
And our first stop takes us to ancient Egypt.
Right, roughly 3100 BC.
Yep. With a board game called Senet, which is potentially the oldest board game ever discovered.
Wow.
It was this grid of 30 squares, incredibly popular. But you didn't just find Senet boards in, like, an ancient Egyptian living room,
Where did they find them?
deep inside tombs, including the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because you do not pack a board game for the afterlife right alongside your most sacred religious artifacts, just in case you get bored on a rainy Tuesday in the underworld.
You certainly don't. For the ancient Egyptians, the journey through the underworld was a terrifying gauntlet.
Like a literal test of the soul.
Exactly. It required divine favor. And the mechanics of Senet actually mirrored that spiritual journey. Playing it while you were alive was almost a form of spiritual rehearsal.
But the wild thing is, the utility of Senet wasn't just about theology, right?
No, it wasn't.
The research shows it was used as an object of high-level diplomatic offering between rival nations.
Which is just so cool to think about.
I mean, imagine a head of state today flying across the world to de-escalate a war, and they just hand the foreign leader a copy of Scrabble.
Sounds totally absurd to us.
Right. But giving a Senate board back then was like handing over a sacred relic wrapped in a peace treaty. It wasn't just a casual present.
Well, think about the psychology there. You're sitting across from a rival king. You might not speak the same language.
You probably worship different gods.
Right. But when you both sit down at a Senate board and agree to the rules, you are implicitly agreeing to a shared framework of reality. You're building a baseline of trust that a simple conversation just can't achieve.
So we have games acting as like diplomatic icebreakers and spiritual simulators. But if you think ancient games were just quiet, intellectual board games, we need to look at Mesoamerica.
Oh yeah, things get intensely physical here.
Because the Mayas and the Aztecs took the concept of a game and pushed it to an extreme.
We're talking about a bowl game played by pre-Columbian peoples for over 3,000 years.
3,000 years.
Yeah, peaking around 900 to 1200 AD.
And picture this, listener. It's this massive H-shaped stone court, 2 teams using a really heavy, solid rubber ball.
And the mechanics are punishing. They were only allowed to strike this heavy projectile using their hips and their knees.
The physical trauma would have been brutal, and this wasn't some niche hobby either. The scale was massive.
Staggering. Emperor Moctezuma actually demanded a tribute of 16,000 rubber balls every single year.
Just stop and think about the supply chain for 16,000 rubber balls in the late 1400s.
You need dedicated land for rubber trees.
Right, you need hundreds of harvesters. You do not build a continent-spanning economic infrastructure just for a Tuesday night intramural league.
What's fascinating here is the juxtaposition of sport and deadly serious ritual. Because while it served as training sometimes, it was primarily a reenactment of their cosmic creation myths.
And those ceremonies sometimes ended in actual human sacrifice.
Usually the losing team's captain, or sometimes the winners, actually, depending on the ritual.
See, I have to push back on our modern definitions here. If the stakes are literally life and death, and you are stepping onto that court knowing a human sacrifice is imminent, can we even call this a game in the modern sense?
That is exactly the friction between our perspective and theirs. We link the word game to entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But to them, the movement of that ball literally represented the sun and moon moving across the sky.
So the fun aspect was completely overshadowed by religious duty.
Completely.
Yeah.
It was closer to winding a massive cosmic grandfather clock. If they didn't keep the ball moving, they believed the universe would just grind to a halt.
So the utility was literally keeping the sun shining.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so from life and death rituals in the Americas, where games train the soul, we move to the next era where games evolved to train the intellect.
Right, which brings us to ancient Greece.
Where games became the ultimate Trojan horse for education.
The Greeks were incredible at adaptation. They took games from Egypt and added a very clear Greek utility to them.
The perfect example in the source is the game of ocelots.
Also known as knucklebones.
Right, which were literally the ankle bones of sheep or goats. And we have records of Socrates using these bones with his disciple Theaetetus.
But not for gambling.
Mm-hmm.
He used them to teach rhetoric, argumentation, and even statistics.
Because the bones aren't symmetrical like a casino die, right?
Exactly. They have 4 irregular sides, so the way they land is skewed by their physical shape. Socrates was forcing his students to intuitively grasp asymmetrical probability.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I am picturing a modern university professor trying to teach complex probability, and instead of a whiteboard, they deal out a game of Texas Hold'em.
That's a great analogy.
Right, because to win, you have to calculate variance, read psychology, and argue your position by bluffing. Socrates was basically doing that thousands of years ago.
It creates a safe environment to practice really hard cognitive skills. If you mess up calculating sheep bone odds, you lose a game. If you mess up military odds, you lose your city.
And speaking of environments that teach complex skills, we have to talk about Africa and the game of awole.
Yes, often known as African chess.
Or mancala, which people might recognize today. You have this board with 12 pins, and you distribute seeds across them.
And the historical footprint is amazing. The oldest archaeological find dates back to a 4th century Roman fortress in Egypt.
And it's spread globally, to the Middle East, Asia, and across the Americas, tragically, through the transatlantic slave trade.
Right. Enslaved people carried the mechanics of this game in their minds. You didn't need a manufactured board, just dirt and seeds.
It's incredible. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, what was awole actually used for, beyond just passing time?
Well, the article cites this book, Games of Humanity, and it points out awole wasn't just a pastime. It was explicitly used as a foundational educational tool.
So it was teaching kids counting, decision-making, intellectual strategy.
Exactly. By dropping those seeds, they were learning modular arithmetic and resource management.
So did the kids realize they were basically doing math homework? Or is a game just the perfect Trojan horse for education?
No, it's totally a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
When a kid learns rate memorization on a chalkboard, it's tedious. But when they have to run algorithms in their head to capture their friends' seeds, the brain just absorbs the math hungrily.
Because the game gives you immediate, tangible feedback.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen games used for personal education, but our deep dive scales up one last time here. We're heading to China.
To look at a game designed not just for individuals, but for the survival of entire empires.
The game of Go.
Yes. Extremely popular by 25 AD, it spread to intellectual and religious circles in Korea and Japan.
Played on a massive grid with simple black and white stones.
Yeah.
But the strategic depth is infinite.
It is. Curiously, though, Marco Polo completely failed to mention Go in his travel notes when he went to Asia.
Wait, really? How do you miss the most significant game on the continent?
Probably because it lacks the flash of, like, a physical spectacle.
Hmm.
2 people staring in silence at a wooden grid looks boring if you don't know the rules.
Right. He didn't grasp the abstraction, because what was happening on that board was intense warfare.
Exactly. The expert thesis from L. Timbal Duclos in the source highlights this perfectly. He argues Go is essentially a didactic model of Chinese military strategy.
Geopolitics with black and white stones.
Unlike Western chess, where you actively attack to assassinate a king, Go starts with an empty board.
You place stones and they never move. You're trying to secure vacant territory.
Right. You're slowly encircling the enemy, cutting off their supply lines without a direct, bloody clash in the center.
So what does this all mean? We have this massive chicken and egg scenario presented in the text.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Did the ancient generals play Go to practice their military strategy like running simulations of Sun Tzu's teachings? Or was there actual military strategy based on the mechanics they learned as kids playing Go?
The researchers strongly suggest the abstract strategic thinking required to conquer a province was cultivated and perfected on the Go board long before it hit a real battlefield.
Wow.
The utility of the game wasn't just a pastime, it was literally national security.
That is just mind-blowing. And it brings us to the culmination of all this.
Let's synthesize all these threads.
We've got religion and diplomacy with Senate in Egypt.
Societal rituals and keeping the cosmos moving with the Maya ball game.
Education and rhetoric with Socrates and Austerlitz.
Mathematical resilience with Awele.
And military strategy with Go.
The historical record clearly shows that the utility of games often preceded their use for pure entertainment.
They were highly calibrated tools first.
Exactly. Casual pastime second.
Which means the official rulebook is wrong.
Completely wrong.
The Ludoscience article proposes a complete rewrite of that Larousse dictionary definition.
They state that a game is an activity that can be used for entertainment, sure, but it inherently carries potential utility.
Right, potential utility in contexts like religion, the military, or education.
It totally validates the act of gaming.
It really does. So for you listening right now, the next time you sit down for a board game or fire up a video game on your couch, you aren't just wasting time.
Not at all.
You are participating in a 5,000-year-old human tradition of mental and societal training.
Engaging the exact same mechanisms that guided pharaohs and trained ancient generals.
Which leaves us with one final kind of provocative thought for you to ponder. If the ancient games we just discussed were actually secret training tools for war, societal obedience, and rhetoric, what real-world skills are the mechanics of today's most popular games secretly training you for without you even realizing it?